What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today's video, we're going to be talking about the camera settings I use to get the best image quality out of the Canon R6 Mark II. Starting off with video resolution. I prefer to shoot 4K for everything that I shoot, mainly because in post-production, I get more flexibility by being able to turn a wide shot into a medium shot into a close-up, especially when I am outputting to 1080p. The other thing about the Canon R6 Mark II, it's a 6K sensor. So even in 4K, when you shoot 4K, the output is 4K, you could punch in a little bit. You're not really gonna notice a diminishing image quality just because it's a 6K sensor. So shout out to all these camera manufacturers adding that in to give us better image quality and flexibility in post-production. Great thing about the Canon R6, it has multiple frame rates. If you're shooting 1080p 4K, you can shoot 60 frames per second. I prefer to use 60 frames per second when I'm trying to slow down normal motion. People walking, I want to get that. But when it comes down to slowing down fast motion, 120 and higher is preferred. And the only way to get 120 is that you got to drop down to 1080p. Strongly recommend people try to stick with the 60, but if you really need that, you're at a certain event, people are running, playing sports, and you want that slow motion, it's a little soft, 1080p, 120 frames per second, you have to enable that on the Canon R6 Mark II, and that's how you'll get that image quality. In addition to that, one other thing I want you to keep in mind about, shooting 120 frames per second, I believe you lose face tracking, so keep that in mind. If critical focus is important, all right? Canon R6 Mark II was my only camera that I would more than likely shoot IPB, especially for vlogging, simple scenarios, because even with the IPB, you can color grade it, right? Like if you're doing heavy grading in effect, then why not shoot the all eye, just because you're gonna have more room in post-production to handle that. But the IPB is still going to be 422 10-bit, and you can still move that footage, so in terms of people that's going to be slapping on just a Rec 709 LUT when they shoot SYLE 3, IPB is more than enough. So if you want to prioritize saving file spaces and you're doing minimum grading, IPB is the way to go. If you're someone that want to maximize image quality and you don't have a problem with storage space, then all out. Have fun with it, and enjoy it. And if you really want to take it to another level, you can hook up an external monitor, the Canon R6 Mark II, like the Atomos Ninja 5, and you can get external ProRes RAW 6K. Now, with that being said, just FYI, the 6K ProRes RAW is not really, from the test that I've seen and the video I've seen out there, there's not that much of an image bump that justifies, you shooting externally for that reason. Now, if you already have an external recorder and you're going to use it anyway, by all means, and because ProRes RAW is going to work fast on an Apple than just the H.2.65 or H.264 if you got an older machine. But if you got an M1, just use what's internally in camera, the H.2.65. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. If you have an older Mac, ProRes RAW or the H.2.64 on camera, I would probably recommend to you because it's going to be faster to grade on. This is a no-brainer. I don't care what video you're watching. If you want the best image quality out of the Canon R6 Mark II, you're going to shoot Cinema Gamut, and then you're going to shoot SYLE 3. That allows your camera to shoot 422 10-bit internally. If you do not have it in a log setting like SYLE or SYLE 3, you're not getting 422 10-bit internally. So why cripple your camera capabilities by not shooting SYLE 3? And for some of you that might be a little nervous because you're like, I don't really know how to color grade. Most manufacturers, especially Canon, Sony, Fuji, Panasonic, they have a Rec 709 conversion LUT that's provided for free. That as soon as you go into your NLE, you can slap on. It's going to take the log directly into a Rec 709, and you still got all that flexibility in post-production to color grade and match it up to other cameras, which is going to be appreciated. And the other thing about it is most cameras, especially the Canon R6 Mark II, you have view assist, so you can turn that on so you're not looking at a flat picture profile when you're shooting. So turn that view assist on, put it in SYLE 3, Cinema Gamut, and take your footage to the next level. Most cameras have a native ISO on a Canon R6 Mark II. The native ISO is 800. Ideally, you still want to keep mirrorless cameras are great. They came a long way. In any given situation, keeping your ISO down to the lowest level is going to give you the cleanest image. If you're able to shoot at the native ISO, which is 800 on the Canon R6 Mark II, that would be the starting ground that I would recommend. So if you can get it at 800 and then put on an ND filter like I have right now, I have a ND filter on my 35mm lens. I'm shooting at ISO actually 1000 because it's a little dark and I was being a little lazy. I didn't want to take the ND filter off because I was in a spot earlier with a lot more light. So with that said, ISO 800 and then start moving everything around the 180 shutter rule, which basically means you're going to double your frames per second. I'm shooting 24 frames per second, so my shutter is going to be 50. My ISO is going to be 800, and then if I got to make adjustments based on exposure, then my aperture is going to change first, and then lastly, I would change my ISOs. 180 rule, frames per second, you're going to double that. So if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, shutter speed of 50, because this is not a cinema camera, you can't go 48. And then the first thing that I would change would be my aperture. I'm shooting at a 1.8 right now, that's why everything is blurred out. And then I change the ISO. So I change aperture before I change ISO. Right now I'm shooting at a 1.8 just because I'm being a little lazy. I don't feel like taking off the ND filter on the lens and then having to cleave off the lens if I leave a little fingerprint on it. With that being said, you know, I tend to shoot 2.8. So when I do the custom modes, you're on the Canon R6 Mark II, which is very, very beneficial. The older one had it, but it's like soon as you, it didn't work for video. So now you can literally set custom 1 to 24 frames per second, put a 180 rule into it, so you can shut it at 24 frames per second, shutter speed of 50, and then set your aperture to 2.8, and then I could do custom 2 for 60 frames per second, and then literally the shutter speed is going to be 120, and then I can shut aperture of 2.8 and then adjust my ISO accordingly. And I can do the same thing for custom 3. I can make that 1080p, you know, 120 frames per second. So that's one of the benefits. You can go from custom 1 to 2, 3 real quick, from 24 to 60 to 100 and, you know, 20 frames per second. So that's something that, you know, on a drop of a fly, you just adjust the ISO and you can assign that to the control ring to take advantage of that. But my aperture preferred choice is 2.8. In this situation, I'm shooting at a 1.8, but 2.8 is just a great little sweet spot. But if I'm on vacation, I'm traveling, I think 5.6 is a place that I like to be at, because 5.6 for most lenses are the sweet spot of maximum image quality, right? I'm shooting with a prime lens, so you can go a little bit lower because it's a 1.8 aperture lens, so 2.8 still image quality is there. But when you're on a zoom lens, 5.6 from a zoom to a prime is normally the sweet spot where you're getting the maximum image quality, less chromatic aberrations and all these other artifacts that might appear. So I recommend 2.8, especially when I'm in my custom modes. But if you're going between a zoom lens and all these other things, sometimes it's good to have 5.6 just because you know it's going to switch automatically when you're using a custom mode. Shooting people, put it in face tracking. It is so great for autofocus. This is video centric, so we're not going to get into photography autofocus, but face tracking all day, every day. This is video focused. If I'm not doing face and I don't want the camera punch into the back and throwing off the focus or anything like that, then I'll probably go manual, as long as the target is not moving that much, you know what I mean? Just so I can get a nice little rack instead of like the electronic rack that kind of happens. But ideally, if you got a face, I got eye tracking on, it's locked in, whether I move left or right, shallow depth of field, I know I'm covered. Welcome to a mirrorless camera with 5-axis image stabilization. I got the 35mm lens on, so coordinated. We have like 7 stops to image stabilization, which is so beneficial when you're going handheld. It's going to be the closest thing you can get to a gimbal without having a gimbal. That's always going to be active on for me. You also have digital image stabilization, which is going to crop on an image a little bit. I don't ever really use it because why would I crop in on an image when this is already 5-axis? I think, you know, if you're someone with like a Canon R8, something like that, that's when that comes into play because it's not IBIS built into the camera. In addition, I have a lens with IS, so I don't never have a problem worrying about going handheld with this setup or even driving in the car. It just handles everything so smoothly, so I appreciate that. So IBIS, we always leaving it on. Digital image stabilization, I'm never cropping in, you know, unless, I don't know, I can't even think of a scenario. I've done it to test it out. It's a little crop, it's not big, but I want the extra bit of space, so I'm not ever using digital image stabilization when I have a camera that has IBIS and I have lenses that have image stabilization. And even if I didn't have a lens without like the Canon RF 28mm, I'm still okay with what I get out of the IBIS 5-axis image stabilization from the Canon R6 Mark II not to use it. I'm gonna go into the camera. I'm gonna turn the audio down to almost off, right? Close to off as possible, maybe 2 stops to just save a little space. This way I'm gonna get a richer sound and audio quality, because now the Sennheiser MKE 400 is doing the heavy lifting, which is preferred. So that's what I recommend. And if you don't have a mic attached and you're using for scratch audio, just put it in auto mode. You know what I mean? That's gonna be a safe bet. And just don't forget that to have that mic in, because you know you might take it out and you know you're going handheld, just grab some footage. But if you need to sync audio and you don't have a mic attached, just put it in auto. Save yourself the headache. Monitoring, I kind of talked about it before. External monitor be great if it's your only camera. This is my C camera, is my main camera when I'm vlogging or traveling and stuff like that. But with that being said, I kind of like it being covert in a smaller setup with just a shotgun mic on top. But if this was my only camera, I can understand about putting like an Adamus Ninja recorder on top. I don't know if I would necessarily use a ProRes RAW, even though 6K could be lovely. I think the only benefit to the 6K for me would be if I'm shooting 17:9, which, you know, DCI, which my C70 can do and my C500 could do internally. So if you're shooting a project and you want DCI, I can understand why you might use the external ProRes recorder for that reason. But other than that, you know, the image quality I've seen from quick sample tests is not enough to justify just buying an extra monitor if I don't have it already, or using it if I don't need it for that reason. I like to keep my setup light. That's the whole benefit of this hybrid camera. I can go really discreet, get amazing image quality, and take advantage of that. Other thing I love about this camera, you can enable crop if you want to turn a 24 into a 35 or a 35 into a 50. So that's why I don't mind, you know, walking around with a prime lens, because I basically got 2 lens options with a prime lens. And yeah, you got a lot more with a zoom as well, because you can convert the zoom into a 1.6 crop. I don't really see no image quality loss when I'm doing that. Customize the camera to fit your needs. Like RF lens, I normally set the control ring to ISO just so I can change it on the fly. You know, for you know, like I don't change my ISO. I like to leave it in a native ISO. I want to change it for aperture, so when I'm going handheld, I can just change it on the fly. And that's okay. You just figure that out for yourself. The audio quality, you know, remember, turn it down. But if you just someone that uses it for scratch audio, you can just leave it in auto audio and, you know, be covered in that way. ND filters on your lenses if you want that shallow depth of field, you know, take advantage of that. If you want an extra step in your image quality, it's not even about an extra step in the image quality, because keep in mind, putting on ND filters, especially cheap ND filters, is actually diminishing the image quality you're getting from your lens. So what you're really getting is more of a shallow depth of field, which is a little different than the image quality. I think the overall cinematic feel of this is going to be a lot more because I'm shooting at a 1.8. But a lot of times I'm also in mind, like if I'm spending $1,000 on L series lenses, I don't want that covering my $1,000 lens, especially like a $20 ND filter. Because what's the point of paying a cheap ND filter on a $1,000 lens, right? It just defeats the whole purpose. So spend that extra money, Polar Pro, Freewell, Nisi, some of these newer ones, Snyder, do that. But if you have like a kit lens, a zoom lens, and it came with a little ND filter and you just getting started out, that's more than enough to, you know, handle that and deal with that. And overall, you know, get a nice little decent tripod, small rig. You know, Ulanzi have some great options out there. I think anything that can hold over 8 pounds, you're good, even if you put an external monitor on top, something to kind of consider. I don't think you need V90. I think V60 is more than enough speed for you. I got V90 because I got a Canon C70 that accepts the SD card, so I go back and forth. But I think V30s or, you know, V60s to be safe. You know, so if you want to shoot high frame rates, it's going to be more than enough. I have 2 128 gigabytes that cover me for all day shooting. The battery life is great. The LPE6H that comes with it, which is going to give you a little bit more, like 15% more battery life than the older models, the LPE6. But also I have backup small rigs, which I like because it got USB-C charging, and I can still put it on a Canon battery charger, but I like that flexibility of the USB-C charging. So add that into the wheelhouse. Also keep in mind, the Canon R6 can charge the battery internally when you hook up a USB-C cable to it. In addition to that, you can use it as a zoom camera with the right USB-C cable. You know, make sure the one that comes with the Canon, you always keep that one because it works really, really well. As I always say, no such thing as a perfect camera. It's like, what is the perfect camera for you? And this is a camera that is going to be perfect for a lot of people out there, even though it's more than a year old now. So signing off, as always, stay creative, be courageous, and get on your grind.